YouTube. So thank you all for coming. You have a wonderful, hope you're all having a wonderful evening. It's dark. It's all the way dark over here. So this is a first for us to be having the Zoom conversation post the fallback from the end of daylight saving. So welcome. Thank you all for coming for the third and final installment of Career Conversations webinar series that the Center for Nonprofit and NGO Studies is organizing. Myself and Julianne. My name is Mark Schuler. Julianne O'Connell is assistant director, and we got together to connect with some of our alum and some of our friends to help students navigate the job world, because it's not always the case that you have advice as to how to make a successful career in nonprofits and working in and around the NGO sectors or government. So this is an opportunity to hear real advice, real experience of folks that are once where you were, once where you are now, to try and think through some of the tips, some of the lessons learned, the stumbles, and real stories about how it is to take your degree and do the next step, whatever that next step is. So today the conversation is about working in and with government, and that doesn't necessarily mean working inside government. It could be working alongside government, receiving government grants or advocacy regarding government. And government in the United States has all kinds of layers. We have the federal, the state, and several layers of local government. So we're going to be hearing from some of those folks today. So I'm going to just thank and welcome the panelists who are here. Deanna Cada is a purposeful professional and servant leader with over 2 decades of experience in the community mental health and family resources industries. Deanna's purpose and passion in her work are to support and develop communities through understanding behavioral health care. Currently, Deanna is serving this purpose as the executive director of the DeKalb County Community Mental Health Board in DeKalb, Illinois, where she has been since 2015. She also works as an adjunct professor at NIU in sociology and NGO, where she is also an alum, earning her BS in sociology criminology and MS in human and family resources. A fierce advocate for the underprivileged, she has served on numerous community boards of directors, including the Association of Community Mental Health Authorities of Illinois, the Illinois Family Violence Coordinating Council, the DeKalb County Juvenile Justice Council, and Safe Passage of DeKalb County. In addition, Deanna has earned numerous honors, including the Illinois Governor's Certificate of Appreciation for Outstanding Service and the Community Crisis Center Partner in Peace Award. She is a loving wife of almost 30 years, a proud mother of 2 feisty adults, and a devoted follower of the show Top Chef. So she has a LinkedIn. I want to put that link in the chat. So thank you, Deanna. We're excited to have you here. Next up, we have Brian Joanis, graduated at NGO in 2018. Started the program when it was called Community Leadership and Civic Engagement. Brian started his career in local government as an intern for the village of Roselle in July 2018, while obtaining his graduate degree in public administration from NIU. In June 2020, he was hired by the village of Roselle as a full-time management analyst in the village administrator's office focused on economic development initiatives. Brian was later promoted to his current position as the village's assistant administrator in August 2021, assuming additional responsibilities, including managing the village's information technology department, overseeing commuter parking operations, budgeting, personnel, risk management, and leading the implementation and reporting of the village's 2022-25 strategic plan. Brian loves people and listening to their stories. He gets most of his professional satisfaction by working with his team to build an enjoyable, hardworking environment. Brian, thank you and welcome back. We're excited to have you back. And last, we have Ian Pearson, graduated in 2020 of the NGO and political science programs. At NIU, Ian was the 2020 Lincoln Laureate due to involvement with a variety of public service-oriented extracurriculars, such as student government and an internship with the NIU Foundation. After graduating, Ian earned a Master of Public Affairs at the University of Wisconsin La Follette School of Public Affairs. In 2022, Ian moved to Washington, D.C., where he now works as an analyst for the United States Government Accountability Office. Welcome back, Ian, and thank you, and thank all three of you. So we had prepared a series of questions in advance to give folks a chance to start their thinking, but this is a conversation. So if you have questions you would like to ask, feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask them. But we're just going to go ahead and get started. We have a couple questions specifically for the NNGO majors. So tell us about yourself. Why did you pick NNGO, and what were you looking for when you graduated? Ian, let's start with you.
Thank you for the question, and good evening, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. I originally came to NIU for a couple reasons. One is two of my older siblings were Huskies. They had studied English and biology at the university and were really intensely proud and had wonderful experiences there. So when it came time for me to look at colleges, it was definitely on my short list. As I went through the process, NIU had a really strong financial aid program, and it seemed like a really good balance between cost and the opportunities that I would have. So I came to NIU. I sort of picked NNGO by happenstance. I came in as a political science and pre-med student, thinking I was going to become a doctor and work on health policy. And after the first semester being in chemistry, I knew that I didn't really want to pursue the medical part of that. Still really interested in government. But I took then CLCE 100, the introductory class to the program, as an elective. I had heard that it was a really great elective class, sort of connected to my interests. So I thought, why not? Let's try it out. And I loved it. I learned about community organizations, their impact that they can have driving policy change, affecting communities. And after that semester, I declared my major for the NNGO program and spent the next couple of years figuring out what I wanted to do. I really wasn't sure at first. So next few years, I studied both political science and NNGO, learning about the intersection of government and civic organizations and nonprofits. And that later informed some of my choices going to graduate school and then later working for the government.
Thank you, Ian. Brian, why did you pick NNGO, and what were you looking for when you graduated?
Kind of similar background. I was an older adult student, sector for about 9 years, decided to go back to school, and had some credits at a local community college. And like most people, I was kind of figuring out what that next step would look like for a different career, and just something that met more meaning to me personally. So when I was ready to transfer, I actually happened to fall upon the website on the NIU website, and the program at the time had that long, lengthy title, but the service and kind of community impact really resonated with me and kind of just led me to start that program. And once I transferred and took some courses, it just felt right. I felt at home. I was around a lot of like-minded people that were into service and were into giving back to community, maybe didn't know exactly what that meant for them. Maybe they had volunteer experience or someone in their family that was involved in nonprofits or a similar story. And that just kind of led me through the NGO kind of program. And there was a professor at the time, Dr. Shadaman, that kind of plucked me out of a class when I was a senior and was kind of like, hey, have you ever thought about local government? And that's kind of what spurred me directly into the MPA program at NIU, where I got my master's, and launched me into an internship in local government. So for me personally, at the end of my kind of NGO degree, I was really looking for a job. I was looking for, okay, how do I take this classroom experience and put it in a practical sense and still be around similar people that I had worked with, whether they were colleagues as classmates or professors that kind of led me along the way.
So there's not one route. It's all really quite serendipitous, where you find your passion, you just follow a student, follow a friend, have a random experience with a potential advisor. So yeah. And Deanna is also a Husky, but graduated before there was a program. Can you tell us about your career journey? What led you to your current position? We know you've got lots of passion. So how did you end up where you are?
So yeah, thank you. I'm super excited to be here and see some familiar faces. So really nice to see everybody, and thanks for the opportunity. So I am a Husky. I graduated from Northern with a sociology criminology degree a long time ago, way before NNGO was even thought about. And my passion, what I wanted to do is I wanted to work with delinquent youth. That was the path that I wanted. And I actually started out at a small nonprofit and doing counseling, substance use disorder counseling. And it was good work, but it was not well paying and there was not benefits. It was really a labor of love, a passion job. And at the time, an opportunity came up to work for juvenile court services probation in DeKalb County. And it met a lot more of my needs in terms of needing benefits like health insurance, needing pay that was more substantial than what I could get at a nonprofit. And so that really started my career journey. And it was doing what I wanted. My passion was working with delinquents, and that allowed me the opportunity to do that. And I did that for 15 years. But as often happens in direct service, I kept seeing a churn, right? So we had delinquents coming through and there wasn't a lot of opportunity to change their path. By the time they came onto probation, many of the people that we worked with were very entrenched in the system. And so really wanted to look upstream. How do we make difference, before people get into a probation situation? And so that led to nonprofit. And I went and worked at a counseling agency as the executive director in a nonprofit. And it was great. And we were able to do some prevention work and really kind of stop that trajectory for some students, some juveniles into probation. But the honest truth is working in nonprofit, once again, is really hard. And so I had the opportunity, I had a couple other steps in there to go back and work in government. And, one thing is you all come into your careers to just really be aware of is, what does have stability, what has a pay rate that's a livable rate, what are the benefits that exist. And so the mental health board gives me the opportunity, because we're a funder of behavioral healthcare services. So we fund nonprofits in behavioral healthcare, but it gives me all those government benefits and still the ability to work with nonprofits in a field that I'm very passionate about and I very much love. And so, we'll talk a lot about this as we go on tonight, but there's a lot of personal and professional reasons to look at nonprofit and or government work and how those kind of fit together and what each of those, the challenges and benefits of each of those positions. So I've been with the Mental Health Board for 9 years, and I plan to finish out my career here. If you had asked me all those years ago if I would have ended up in a position like this, I would have told you no. So what Mark said about, things are not always the way you plan. Your career can lead you to places that you don't expect. And there's a lot of opportunities to kind of keep your eyes open for.
Thank you, Deanna. That's really good advice, as always. Keeping your eyes open and follow where your passions take you, and being open to opportunities as they present themselves, and working to present those opportunities by being clear and focused and not shy about what your interests are. Leads us to the next question. Let's start with Brian. How did you first get involved in a career working in or with a government?
Yeah, so I kind of touched upon it before, but I really, the MPA program at NIU, even if you're an older adult or somebody coming directly out of undergrad at a younger age, the first thing that they do is kind of slate you into an internship program with the municipality. So you intern with a bunch of different organizations, and they kind of pick and choose the right fit for them and the right fit for you. That happened to be Roselle for me. I was very fortunate, very lucky to get into a place that kind of put me right in the mix of the administration department and really had a lot of hands-on experience working on projects, not just sitting in a cubicle and kind of wondering what the next day was going to bring, but I was fortunate enough to have good leadership with people that have not only graduated from NIU themselves, but also just kind of recognize the importance of giving students kind of the practical experience of learning about how a government organization works, knowing about the different departments, getting out and about meeting the community members and the organizations that make Roselle a great place to live and work. So I kind of got just kind of thrown into that and was fortunate enough through kind of succession and luck and a little bit of hard work that at the end of my degree, I got an opportunity to be hired full time. So I really had kind of not a unique, I think, because I think the MPA program does a good job of kind of funneling you into organizations that end up having employment opportunities. And even if you don't get hired from a government that you intern with, there's plenty of municipalities in Illinois. As you know, there's over 1,200 of us. So, and it's a small world too. So you make those connections instantly. And I think it put me in a great place to just meet the right people at the right time. And even if I didn't land in Roselle, I feel like I was prepared to take that next step to get hired somewhere else.
Thank you, Brian. So Ian, how did you first get a job in the government sector?
I came into NIU with a real passion for public service. I was an election judge in high school, and that was sort of my first interaction with government. Registering to vote, then helping others vote. And so at NIU, I channeled that interest into my student involvement. I was a member of the Student Government Association. I volunteered and interned on political campaigns while I was a student at NIU. And I did a lot of voter registration. I found that the nonpartisan activity was ultimately what interested me most, helping others participate in our system of government. So between those experiences and coursework and an NGO and political science, I was exposed to potential careers in government and the nonprofit sector. And candidly, as I came to the end of my degree, I had no idea what I was going to do. I could see careers in the nonprofit sector. I could see careers in government equally viable. But the important thing about the year I graduated is it was also the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. And at that time, job prospects dried up. It was looking like it was going to be very difficult to get hired at either a nonprofit or in government. So I did what a lot of people do in economic downturns. I went to grad school, went to Wisconsin's public affairs program precisely because it bridged administration and policy. You took classes in public management, learning about federal organizations, state and local organizations, but then there were also opportunities to take classes learning more about nonprofits and community organizations. So I really liked that. While I was in grad school, I figured out that my skill set and my interests lied really clearly in the policy realm. I really liked thinking about, designing, and evaluating different public policies. And so that lended itself to a government job. I think there were potentials for me to go to the nonprofit sector. I would never rule it out. I think the public mission is really similar in the nonprofit sector, and there's a lot of opportunities to work on policy issues there. It just so happened that coming out of graduate school, a government job made the most sense. And I think we have some later questions about the differences. So I'll talk more about it there, but that it was a little bit much like becoming an NGO major. It was a little bit happenstance that I decided to go to grad school and then into my career when I did.
Yeah, and that's actually a really great segue to the next question that we have prepared. So let's start with the similarities. Because, for example, Deanna's work, solid career in the nonprofit sector before working in the government sector. What are some of the similarities between government and non-governmental jobs? What experience, what knowledge, what skills, or Ian just said the skill set. What skills transfer well in the nonprofit NGO sector and the public sector? Deanna, would you mind giving us a start?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. because I was surprised actually by how many similarities there are, at least in my position. So I work for local county government, and mental health boards exist throughout the state of Illinois, but they kind of look different wherever you go. So some of them are municipality based, we're county based, some are township based, so different levels of government. But one of the big similarities between what I do with government and what I did in nonprofit is I work for a board. So all the board information you learn in an NGO can really transfer also to boards in government. So I am an executive director. I report to a board. The board makes the decisions, and I carry out that work. And that is very similar between nonprofit and government work. So that's one area. Another is just having a really, once again, for me, because I fund organizations, having an understanding how nonprofits work, understanding funding streams. So how do nonprofits get their money? Because government has a role to play in a lot of nonprofit budgets. And so understanding grants, understanding contracts, and that's a big one. Contracts can be really confusing, but it's really good to understand that. And that's transferable between nonprofit and government. Understanding donations. So there's a lot of similarities in looking at how understanding budgets. Now, the budgets might not be the same, but there is definitely similarity there. A lot of governments can apply for grants. And so that grant work, understanding how grant reporting works, understanding outcomes, understanding performance measurements, that is transferable between nonprofit and government work. And really, just simple things like human resources, some of those real, once again, logistics that are very practical, working with people, understanding customer service, understanding marketing of programs. All of those are transferable between government and nonprofit.
Thank you. Brian, what are some of the similarities you noticed between the skill sets and experiences of nonprofit and government sectors?
Yeah, well, definitely. She hit it right on the head with kind of a similar structure. Typically, like in my local government, we report to a board of elected officials, especially in the administration office, where the key policy kind of developers based upon the initiatives that the board sets in their priorities. And then also similar things. So grant writing, 100%. And contracts, we do a ton of contracts. I mean, to me, though, some of the other things that maybe weren't mentioned yet is kind of that similar community need aspect. While I haven't worked for a nonprofit before, there's a mission and there's a need because of a gap that exists. And in the public sector, that's exactly what we do. We provide municipal services to a community, but then also we experience some of the same gaps that exist for nonprofits that may take over kind of the root cause issues of what may exist in a community. And we often support them in a similar goal because we're supporting the same client, right? So that's our residents, that's our businesses. So that public service kind of aspect to it, I think, is truly important. And I've had hands-on experience working with local nonprofits in our village and kind of using the classroom and kind of volunteer experience that I've had to build those relationships with those key decision makers and the people that do a lot of the hands-on work. So that's what I would add to that.
Ian, you want to weigh in on the similarities, or want to jump to the differences?
Sure. I mean, I think there's a couple more similar. I mean, there's a lot of overlap between both sectors. I think, that commitment to the public mission of working collaboratively to address social problems and big challenges in our society. I think something that I have found as I've progressed to a career in government is program evaluation. I took the NNGO program evaluation class, and there's a lot of overlap between evaluating the success of a nonprofit initiative or a program and evaluating government programs. I mean, there's a lot, in addition to the underlying common purpose, a lot of the resources look similar and a lot of the challenges are pretty similar. So I found that a lot of those skills are very transferable.
At the same time, it is a different sector. So what are some of the differences between government and non-governmental jobs? What are particularities within government and within this working for local government and national governments? So we just heard from you, Ian. Why don't we just continue with you?
Sure. And from my perspective, some of the important differences are scope. I think nonprofits are a little bit more likely to be working on the ground with communities, offering a direct service, and a big difference is nonprofits have a lot more latitude to pursue advocacy, whether it's on specific policies, advocating for specific communities. In my experience, at least at the federal level, government jobs are a little bit broader. They're removed a little bit from direct service, where you're maybe designing programs, evaluating them, really implementing laws enacted by Congress, in my case, or evaluating big government policies. So there's a little bit of a removal. And I think, Deanna mentioned this earlier, but in government, there's a little bit more of a clear career progression. You have a sense of the type of money you'll be making over time, the type of career opportunities you might have, within your agency or within your organization. And there's really well-established, expectations for pay and benefits, as well as a work-life balance. And for me personally, that was really important. I was a first-gen college student with a lot of student debt, and so I had to make smart choices coming out of my college experience where I could merge my passions with a real financial need. And so for me, working in government where I can predictably plan for how to address my student debt and earn a comfortable living, that stability was really important. And it led me to work on, toward a public mission in the government space instead of the nonprofit one.
Deanna, would you want to weigh in on this? Some of the differences you noticed?
Sure. And for, what we do at the Mental Health Board, there's quite a few. One of the big ones is that as government, we're required to follow Open Meetings Act and Freedom of Information Act. So nothing we do can be done unless it happens in the public eye. So the public, because we work for the public, we are funded by taxpayer dollars. They have a right to know everything that happens within the Mental Health Board. And so all of our meetings, our agendas are always posted both at our location and online. Anybody from the public can come in and join one of our meetings and watch what's happening. If anybody in the public wants to know about why we fund a certain way we do or how we feel about certain things, they can request a Freedom of Information Act request and get that information. So that's a big difference between government and nonprofit. Nonprofits don't have to publish any of that information, and government does. So that's a biggie. Another one for us is risk. That, because we're utilizing taxpayer dollars in the work that we do and we're accountable to the public, we are pretty risk adverse when it comes to how we fund, how we spend our money. We're not going to, take taxpayer dollars and put them towards something that is not proven, because we're really accountable for that. We have to be good stewards for those dollars. So why nonprofits might be able to try programs that, are new or exciting or haven't been proven yet. Government generally can't do that because we're very risk adverse. I agree with Ian 100% about the scope. I think, working in nonprofit and knowing that we did so much direct service, the government piece is kind of that bigger picture. So, it's not just working with an individual, but we're working with the entire community. And that has some pitfalls with it as well. Politics is important no matter what you do, but when you work in government, having a good awareness of local, state, and federal politics is required, because once again, we work for the taxpayers, we're funded by taxpayers, and so we have to be very cautious about the information that we put out there about our motivations for things. We as a board, while as individuals, we can be liberal or conservative or anywhere on that scale. As a board, we have to take in all perspectives and all all of people's ideas about things and be able to give that back out to the community, where nonprofits, like Ian was saying, with advocacy, with their direction, don't have to be as fair and balanced with things. So you can have nonprofits that are out there doing work that others might feel is controversial, such as supporting women's rights, supporting people's ability to get an abortion or not have an abortion, where government really doesn't get to work in that space because we're appealing to all people within a community. And then, I think that really those are the biggies. It's just that our customer is always the taxpayer, because that's where our funding comes from. And so we always have to make sure that we're giving them their product or their philosophy back to them, because that's who we answer to.
Thank you. It's an important reminder that the community is made up of individuals who don't agree with each other, but we all share a common pool of resource. When we go to the gas station, that's a gas tax. When we go to the grocery store, there's a sales tax. Even if you don't pay income tax or a property tax, that everyone contributes equally, or not equally, everyone contributes to the common resource, and we need to be respectful of that. So that is why you see more innovation in a nonprofit sector, because nonprofits are not constrained by the same issues. On the flip side, government is more, has more structured accountability in woven into the work. Brian, would you like to add to this conversation about the differences you notice between the sectors, that not-for-profit, non-governmental, and the governmental sectors?
Yeah, I think all the points that were just made are spot on. And one thing to add is just, me myself, right? I live outside of the town that I work in. I can join a local nonprofit's board, not being a resident of that community, right? And on the elected side, we have people that are homeowners, right? Their kids go to the schools in town. They have an opportunity to petition and to be voted into elected council, to either be the mayor or a trustee or another elected position like a clerk. So I think that's a little bit different too, is that there's seems to be more flexibility when it comes to serving on a nonprofit. It's not limited to your geographic area. But again, I just want to reiterate, like, the funding mechanisms, taxes compared to other funding that nonprofits run off of, primarily grants or donations. And then that transparency factor, the limitations that kind of exist for local governments like ourselves, especially Roselle being a non-home rule community, and that we're kind of confined to state law in a lot of what we're able to do and how we regulate locally. And then I think it was touched upon, but just kind of like that main core service delivery, that being kind of regulating and developing policy surrounding public health and safety, right? It's that core service delivery is a little bit different, where nonprofits have more flexibility into kind of addressing some of those issues that we've already talked about.
Thank you for this. I was asking also the second part of the question, that like any differences between local and national governments. Ian works in Washington for the federal government, and Deanna works for the county, and you work for the village. Anything particular about any of these levels of government, or is it the same principles? I hate to use the word red tape, because it has a very negative connotation, and it is a weapon in certain conversations. But do you experience more or less of it when you're working in the village hall versus Congress?
I think if I go first, I don't know, but for me personally, I have not worked in the county government. I've not worked in the federal government. I do feel like local government has the ability to be a little bit more hands-on. But again, this is kind of coming from a narrow perspective. Our town is just under 23,000 residents. I can get anywhere within the town in a matter of 10 minutes max. So there's been plenty of times where, as the assistant administrator, I've had a resident call me or a business call me, and I've literally hopped in my car and I've driven out there and I've met them. I just feel like that kind of like intimacy with your constituents is important, and I'm very grateful to have that opportunity. But on the flip side, I've worked directly with representatives of the federal government, representatives of county, especially with our social services program. So there'll be a call that we'll get that the police will respond to. We have two full-time social workers on staff in the police department, and their job is to kind of respond to a call with the police officer, kind of figure out what may be the root cause, what may be the real issue that's going on with a family or an individual. And then we work well with the county on kind of referring them to resources that we don't have. And I think that, whether that's kind of the layer cake example that's always used, or whether that's the red tape, I've seen it work where there's things from the federal side that we don't understand and it trickles down to the state. It gets to us. And I lean on people like Ian to help make those policies digestible and understanding. But at the same time, that's necessary to have that kind of pipeline in effect to make sure that the funds, especially that get sent down from the federal level to the state, are used appropriately when they get to our hands eventually. But on the county level specifically, I mean, we work hand in hand with them. I mean, DuPage County is very active. We have a sliver in Cook County too, but they provide a lot of services that we can't provide our residents with just the kind of structure that's set up and the level of personnel that we have.
Ian, it looked like you wanted to say something as well.
Yeah, and I mean, similarly, I've not worked in local or county government, and so I also have a somewhat limited perspective on this. But, I think there's a couple of differences. One is the federal government has a lot of well-established policies and procedures. You mentioned the word red tape, and while it's a bit of a stereotype and it's not always as constraining as, sort of the stereotype would have you believe, there are a lot of accountability mechanisms. There's a lot of well-established, traditions, lines of authority that dictate, to an extent, the policies that are, created, implemented, and how they're implemented. So I think that's one. Two, again, is scale. A lot of national, federal government jobs relate to really large programs that affect, potentially the whole country, could span outside of the country. And so there's a little bit of a removal from that direct service delivery in a lot of federal jobs where you're thinking, about large scale impacts of big policy decisions. And so there's a lot of rigor that goes into determining and then evaluating whether decisions are effective or positive. And so I think things move a little bit slower because of that, just because of the large impact and some of those really well-established bureaucratic procedures.
I'd much rather have a layer cake myself.
So if I may, I think it's pretty fun that we have a village representative, county, and then federal here having this conversation. And once again, I've only worked at county level government, so that's a perspective I have. I think one of the things that's really different between county and then going up to state or federal is just access. I mean, if I need to talk to the county board chairman, I call her and I can talk to her. Or if I need to talk to the city manager in DeKalb, I can pick up the phone and talk to him and know them. And because I live in the community and I'm also a taxpayer in this community as well, like that access is really available. When you start going up to access to state, between local and state, I have a few contacts at state government, but not as many. And then when you start talking federal, that looks really different. While I have contacts in federal government, it's a lot more limited and not as intimate as I have with local government contacts. The other relationship, I think, is that exactly what Ian said about that scope piece. Like federal decisions are made to help the entire nation, right? And then state is for the state. And then local is like, how do we interpret these big policies down to our community to have that make sense? And then where are those areas where local government can maybe support or fund a gap that state and federal government cannot. And what I'm thinking of in my world specifically is Medicaid. So Medicaid is a funder. It is a federal program that's funneled through the state of Illinois. And there are people in our community who don't have Medicaid, who maybe don't have private insurance. And so that's a great place for the mental health board to go in and fill a gap. So the state covers so much, feds cover so much, and then local can come in and they have a little bit more leeway to fill some of those gaps that are left over by those other areas of government.
Yeah, I used to have my students in two of my classes do a policymaker chart. What level of government does what thing on your issue? It always surprises me how little we teach our students about the differences between the federal government and its response to, say, immigration than, say, the counties, or healthcare provision. So understanding which level of government does what, I think, is a really key challenge for civic action, and also to be thinking about what kind of passion you have. Some folks are really into the direct service provision, so maybe doing more local government as opposed to policy work or analytical work, more toward the federal level. I just the next question we have is, what surprised you about working in or with governments? I don't know who wants to give it the first crack at this. Anything that surprised you about working with government?
I could go first. I mean, since I kind of came from the private sector, I knew a little bit about government, but other than just paying my water bill, right, or seeing police cars out on the road, or seeing a fire engine or a public works truck, I didn't really understand kind of the inner workings of all the programs and services that local government offer. And when I stepped into the office and got kind of addicted immediately to the buzz of just how much goes on all the time, and especially how quickly your day can change. And I think that goes back to kind of the similarities of like nonprofit and local government. We just wear so many different hats in our jobs. And you can see, like, from that elegant kind of introduction that Mark gave, it's prideful to say, like, oh yeah, I do this, I do that, I do this, but at the same time, that's a heavy responsibility. And I think that's what really surprised me about local government, is how much kind of we're expected to do by the community, with how kind of not little resources, but just expected little resources to get it done effectively. Because nobody as a resident likes to see, for instance, like a bloated local government that isn't maybe upholding to the level of satisfaction that the residents desire. So to me, that really kind of opened my eyes to just the impact that you can have, but really to take the job extremely seriously, and but to have fun with it. And I love that. It's just that every day can bring a different challenge, and you're working with just people all the time. So many different types of people that come from different backgrounds and places of life that you may not understand or have any experience with, but you learn so much being exposed to so many different perspectives and different ways of life. And it's very rewarding.
I think something to just piggyback on what Brian said is, and the idea that you take it very seriously, the work very seriously when you work for government. I mean, that can be true in any profession, but I'm never not Deanna Cada, executive director of the mental health board. I'm out with my family, I'm out with my friends, whatever I do, people know that, know who I am and what I do in the community, and may want to talk about that, or may have a complaint or an issue or a compliment even. And there's no separation. Which is just the price that those of us in government pay. Like, if we're going to do this work and we're going to get the benefit from doing the work, we also just really are always going to be associated with who we are within the government structure, especially in local government, because our communities really are small at the end of the day. The other thing that's really surprising to me is how different governments can look, especially in Illinois. So if you've seen one county, if you've seen one municipality, you've seen one. So mental health boards and counties work very differently. Probation offices in different counties work very differently within the state of Illinois because we have this system where local government is in the hands of local people. And so, policies that are required by the state or the feds are going to be the same, but day-to-day policies can look very, very different between different local government offices. And that's really surprising because you think, oh, it's going to be the same wherever you go. And it's not. If you live in DeKalb County, it's going to be one way. DuPage is going to look very different. And then Cook is going to be a whole different beast because we're very different. Our cultures are different. Our communities are different in terms of they're rural, urban, suburban. And so the work that we do looks really different.
Yeah, I would just add, I think the other two's responses were really spot on. But for me, I think it's true to say that the federal government is the largest employer in the United States. And what surprised me is the range of jobs that exist, whether, and also the types of education or experiences that translate well to that. If you can think of a job, there's probably a government version of it where you're doing that kind of work. And I've worked with people from a wide variety of, academic disciplines, a wide variety of professional experiences, and all of those can translate into a government job. And I do want to go back to the red tape thing, because while there are really well-established, policies and procedures within government, something that surprised me too is the more I learned about it, the more I learned that there's a lot of room for bright and creative people to have a positive impact on the issues that you care about. Government is interesting in that it's at the same time a service provider, a policy designer, a policy implementer, and a funder. Did I say funder? I might have already said funder, but government wears a lot of hats. And so there's a lot of avenues to address social issues and a lot of room for you to contribute in that, in your role. So I think ultimately it was a bit of a surprise to learn that the opportunities that are available to you.
Thank you. And thank you, Ron, for your note in the chat. I would like to ask, since Deanna mentioned like the benefits of working in government, we never actually asked you like what rewards or what do you get out of working for the government? Ian just mentioned the satisfaction of getting the work done. Anything else pop in your heads about like what is it that you all in government service? I work for the government and I work for a public university, so it's funded by the government. It has a private structure, but I vision myself as a public service employee as well. Anything in particular you want to say that share with everybody about what you gain from this work?
I mean, I think that once again, on the local government level, change really happens slowly in government. It takes a long time for things to happen. But when you're moving in the right direction and the right things happen, getting to see the impact of that and learn the impact of that is incredibly rewarding. So I think Brian talked a little bit about one of the things the mental health board was able to do in partnership with the DeKalb Police Department was implement police social workers. So that position hadn't existed till about 4 years ago. Funding from the mental health board, agreement with DeKalb Police Department, we now have social workers that go out on calls that are behavioral health care calls. And we didn't know how that was going to work. And it has worked fantastically. And now we're up to 3 police social workers. We're up to 4 departments that are utilizing that. It took a long time. There was a lot of challenges, but being able to see the results of that and knowing that worked and being a part of that, I mean, that's what gets me out of bed every day, is knowing that we really can impact change for a whole community. And the board, my board is 9 volunteers. Like, I get paid to do this work, but my board volunteers to do it. And when we can implement change that impacts the community, there's nothing better than that. And because I love behavioral health care, any of those positive changes make it worthwhile. And it's challenging. It's great. Like, I am not bored. There is never a day where I'm like, oh, what am I going to do today? There is always something challenging and fantastic to do and learn about. And while that can be frustrating, at the end of the day, I would rather have that frustration than not have the challenges that go with being a government employee.
Yeah, it's similar for me. There's two big things. I think one is that public mission that Deanna was just talking about. You know, waking up every morning knowing that the work that I'm doing is to benefit, you know, my country and my community. That's a big motivator for me. It makes me feel like the work I'm doing is important, and it makes me feel like the work that went into getting there, of, you know, getting through 2 college degrees, of networking and doing the internships, is worth it because I get to have a positive impact. For me personally, I have learned a lot. The organization that I work for is the Government Accountability Office, which is a nonpartisan research organization that does a lot of learning. As an analyst, I spend a significant portion of my time learning about how other organizations work, how programs are offered, and then doing some research to talk through best practices and making recommendations for them to improve. And so I'm constantly learning about new topics, about new issues, and thinking of new and novel ways to apply that knowledge to help other government organizations. It's really fulfilling.
Yeah, that's a really great answer. And I could piggyback on all that. So I'll stick with kind of stuff that maybe we haven't talked about. So for me, some of the fun stuff to do in local government is to really see the changes that you make that directly impact like the quality of life and the community that people love to live in or choose to live in, right? Choose to work in, choose to raise their kids in. So for me, like we do a lot of community events, and to see kind of like the planning that goes behind that, with the idea that comes from whether it be local officials or whether it be community members that serve on some of these special event committees, when all that kind of goes into fruition and you can see like the happy faces when you're out at a festival and everything just goes as planned. That's one of the best kind of experiences that I've been able to be a part of. And then also just kind of like the policy implementation process itself on the local level. You can literally have a group of residents that see a problem that exists in their neighborhood or see a problem that exists that impacts the community at large. They can come to a board meeting at any time. They can speak to their elected body. That trickles down to staff like myself. We then work as a team to figure this out, and what changes do we need to make, or what new program do we need to consider adopting. We work with our frontline staff at the same time to see how we would implement that on a ground floor level, and then putting all those pieces together and seeing that work and seeing that change really happen is super rewarding. And then just like the power of collaboration, I think on the local level, what I found most enjoyment of is the fact that on the private sector, it's competition. And on this side, it's like I can hit up a city manager, an assistant, or a finance director, a public works director in another community, and they don't mind sharing, what's worked, what hasn't worked, because we're all in the same sector. We're all working towards the same goal. So that kind of team atmosphere to me is what keeps me going, because there is burnout in this job. I mean, we talk about what we love about it, but it's true. It's hard work. But you got people all around you to support you and to kind of remind you constantly why you got into this. And I think that that's something important to share.
Yes, thank you. Real advice, how to deal with burnout. I think that's also super important as well. I used to work in the nonprofit sector. I actually got laid off. That's why I went to graduate school. So these trajectories are pretty unique to us as individuals, but there's some common themes about the expectations that are put on us, multiple competing expectations. We have a couple final questions that we had prepared, but I do want Ian to be able to answer that question that Roland posed about any opportunities for international students in the federal or state government sector.
Can't say I have a particularly good answer on that. I know there are different restrictions in terms of citizenship requirements for federal and state jobs. So I probably refrain from answering because I don't have a good answer on that. But I will say that public job requirements are available on the website. So if you apply for federal jobs through USA Jobs, all of the requirements are listed there. There's a number of federal resources that say, what qualifications you need to meet in order to work in a federal job. And so the resources are out there, but I personally don't know the exact restrictions.
I will say that we have our first international intern from Nigeria on the local side, but he is, like Ian said, he's a contracted employee with NIU through the MPA program. And he started about 6 weeks ago. But yes, I mean, if he were to become an employee of the village, either as an intern or something else, there would have to be different processes to make that happen. But there are different pathways too. Like if you're still in school, the MPA program is something that offers that ability to international students.
So I am being mindful of Monday night is the village board meeting in Roselle, which is why Brian has to leave us early-ish. So I wanted to collapse the final two questions about how you prepared for your job, because a lot of you've already talked about how you prepared. Any advice that you would like to offer current students, particularly those who aren't yet seniors? Why don't we start with you, Brian?
Yeah, kind of. If I could put myself back in the shoes of being a junior and being in the NGO program, I would be kind of exploring or talking to a lot more people that I didn't have the chance to do or didn't just put the initiative myself to do. And that would be kind of communicating with professors that have real world experience working with NGOs or working with government organizations, or just visiting, different opportunities, different organizations themselves, kind of, just helping prepare myself for the next step on whatever that means. Because I think, like we've all said, the pathway can lead to different things. It doesn't have to start. There is no A to Z. There is no right path. But I just think if I could go back, I would be just communicating with a ton more people and just trying to figure out, like, okay, what do I really want to do? Knowing that it can change, knowing that through life, like your priorities may change or you may live in a different place, but just kind of getting that practical experience is so important. So if you haven't taken an internship yet, or if you hadn't had those discussions with like an executive director or a professor with practical experience, I just encourage you to just pick up the phone or email someone. You can reach out to me too, even on the government side, just to kind of ask those questions to help you decide on what your next step is.
And I don't know if you're able to see the chat. So the question was how to hear about this. And one resource was shared in the chat was the Husky Get Hired, and Stephanie Kummerer added the link to the MPA program itself. So if there's any other additional resources, that would be great. I know you are on your phone, and I'm going to ask everyone if they're comfortable to share their contact information in case students can or want to follow up. So if you can just give me a verbal yes, I'll type your email in the chat. But Deanna or Ian, any advice you would offer to people, particularly non-graduating seniors?
I think a big one, and once again, I know I said this already, but I can't reinforce it enough, is really have a good idea about politics and how politics impact the community that you live in. And that's local, state, and federal politics, like policies and legislation that impacts what you do. When I was young, did not pay a lot of attention to that. And then when I got into probation and I started questioning why decisions were made the way they were, it all related back to, politics. Who were we voting into office, and what decisions were they making based on what they believed? And so paying attention to that is really, really huge. I can't emphasize internships enough. The Mental Health Board has participated in the NNGO internship program, and I always have to start that conversation with, well, we're not a nonprofit, but you're going to get to work with 32 different nonprofits if you do an internship with us. And it's a great way to learn about how government and nonprofit interact, is to do internships. And then to reinforce what Brian said, use your resources. Every time I come and speak at NIU, I am a grad, I work in the community, I support students. Like, you want to come hang out at the Mental Health Board, you want to call me and ask me about how, the work happens, or, what we do over there. If you want to come sit in on a board meeting, please come do that. If you think you want to have anything to do in behavioral health care and you don't know what side of the coin you want to be on, nonprofit or government, I'd love to entertain and have you come learn from what we do at the Mental Health Board. And I'm sure that's true of any department. If you wanted to learn about the circuit clerk's office, Lori Grubbs would welcome you with open arms. Like, use those resources, because people are always willing to share that. And just really, find out what are the policies, what are the legislative pieces around the areas that you're interested in. There's a lot right now that's happening around social justice and, law enforcement and behavioral health care. There's, Illinois recently implemented their no bond, no bail program, and that sort of work impacts a lot more than just jails, right? That has a community reach that it's really good if you understand that kind of legislation, if you're interested in that sort of thing. So just being really aware of what's happening in the sector you're interested in is a great way to prepare, and something that you can start doing now.
So I put my LinkedIn in the chat. You're welcome to shoot me a message. I'm happy to set up a Zoom or email with you. For me, the mentors that I had at NIU and later in grad school and now in my career made a profound difference in my preparedness. And so if I can be of help to any of you, please feel free to contact me. In terms of advice, I think, I just did the sprint from undergrad to grad school to a career, and it was a bit of a whirlwind. And so as I think back over some of the things that made an early difference, one was being involved in student organizations and internship experiences at NIU helped me figure out the things that I liked, and maybe more importantly, the things that I didn't like and the types of careers that wouldn't be a good fit for me. Similarly, I would say don't preemptively decide what you're going to do or how things will work out. That was a lesson that I learned really well with COVID. Your life can change dramatically due to circumstances outside of your control. And so keeping an open mind, in my personal opinion, college is the time to learn more about yourself, whether that's learning about your interests, the skills that you have, and like I said before, the things you don't like. That information is so valuable for making decisions later on. And then as a student, I would say lean into the interdisciplinary nature of NNGO. It's what drew me to the program. Take electives widely, be exposed to different courses, different schools of thought, different subjects. It will make you a more well-rounded student, but it also exposes you to potential careers, to potential ideas that you've never considered before. And for me, that was really important. It actually is what led me to going the policy route into grad school. My capstone project, as well as working with Dr. Shadaman, really opened my eyes to a career in public service. And so I, make use of the resources around you. The last thing I will say real quick is practice wellness and take care of yourselves. I experienced severe burnout in college because I was overcommitted in student organizations, internships and classes, and jobs. And it was a real detriment. And so, take advantage of the opportunities in front of you, but try and strike a balance so you can succeed in your classes and do what you need to do. Make use of the resources on campus. For example, I used NIU's counseling services to work on stress and anxiety related to burnout and being a student. those services outside of the college setting are extraordinarily expensive. And so, make use of those resources that are provided to you at free or low costs, because they can make a big difference in getting through to the college.
Very, very important and good way to end the prepared conversation about the questions that we had in advance. A reminder of the importance of self-care and making full use of the resources that we have available to us as Huskies, and to destigmatize asking for help. I think that is important for all walks of life, not just careers in government. We do have some time for folks in the audience. Thank you all for staying. This time of the semester is always hit or miss in terms of people's bandwidth, and we really do appreciate folks staying through an hour and 15 minutes so far. Any questions that you have? I do see a comment just to me in the chat. This conversation, like all the career conversations at our webinars, is going to be living on our YouTube channel. I will see if I can grab the link to our channel. And we will definitely have this be posted as soon as we're able to the link. So yes, the recording will be sent. Other questions that folks have?
Science, American government, and politics. Again, because most nonprofits have to interact with government. Either they're regulated by government, just like business, but they also partner with them to provide public services. So polls 100.
So that was were folks able to hear that? Okay, that was weird, because when I opened our YouTube channel, it just auto-played the intro to the NNGO Center. So my apologies for that. But that is a link to our YouTube channel. Go ahead and subscribe. You'll notice that there is just the last couple of conversations were posted. Any other questions that folks have before announcing a few things? So Julianne did mention that there is going to be a drawing, and I sent her the list of people that are still here, and randomly she selected two folks that had their cameras on. So Jordan Garrett and Gina Fiorenzia are. Please stop by the NNGO office to pick up your tumbler. So thank you and congrats. And if you did not happen to be selected today, do stop by anyway. We have coffee, we have brochures, we have friendly staff. And I do have a couple QR codes for people. But before any of that, I want to make sure that we take a moment to thank Ian, Brian, and Deanna for coming and sharing their experience, their expertise, and their life stories about how they became fantastic workers in the government sector. So if you can, please unmute or whatever. And thank you. Thank our panelists for coming today. So I wanted to make sure that three of you in particular do feel appreciated, because we do very much appreciate you taking your time today. So thank you all.